I hear from so many couples who come in and they say, we have a good marriage except for when. And that's related to when they're navigating extended family.
Dr. Tracy Dalgleish isn't just a clinical psychologist. She's a relationship architect.
The author of I Didn't Sign Up for This. Dr. Tracy Dalgleish gives us a permission slip to be imperfect and to find joy in the messiness of love.
We don't go into marriages, take in some kind of class. What does it mean to actually communicate? There is this common conflict that shows up most often between two women, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Over 86% of people say yes, that you have a conflictual relationship because in-laws. And so one of the most common things I hear from men or partners is they'll say something like, that's just my mom. She means well. It's not a big deal. One of the most common things I hear from daughters-in-law is, I am made out to be the bad one. I'm the scapegoat. Because she's saying, daughter-in-law is saying, the wife is saying, this doesn't feel good for me. Something isn't feeling good. For some families, a mother and her son, the mother might say, we didn't have any of these problems before she joined the family.
Hi, and welcome to Kidsy Connects. Today on our show, I am so excited to bring to you Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. She's a clinical psychologist, a couples therapist, a sought-after relationship expert. In addition to that, she's also the creator of Be Connected Digital, where she teaches people all over the world how to have healthy relationships. In addition to that, she is also the author of an upcoming book titled You, Your Husband, and His Mother. And she's also the host of a parenting podcast titled Dear Dr. Tracy. She's been featured from media companies and peer-reviewed academic journals around the world. And she joins us here today from Ottawa. Is that right, Tracy?
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Tracy, for having me here.
Thank you so much for making the time. I have been following your work for some time, and I'm absolutely obsessed that this is the topic that is your expertise, because I feel we're all navigating it in our personal lives vis-a-vis our in-laws, our husbands, or our wives or spouses, and so on and so forth. Yet there's so little that is often spoken about how to navigate those relationships in your life. So I'd love to kind of dig in deep with you here today. But just to get our audience familiar, talk to us about, what it is about this field that really drove you to becoming quote unquote an expert in it.
Yes, absolutely. As a couples therapist and psychologist, I have always been curious about watching the dynamics between two people and how there's so much that happens within ourselves on the internal part that then you take all of that to map it on to somebody else, and they have their whole internal parts, and then you're bringing this together to try to make a secure and healthy partnership. And what is so interesting about this work is that we don't go into partnerships, we don't go into marriages and having in-laws, having taken a course, having taken some kind of class in high school. Most people don't have that kind of training around what does it mean to actually communicate in a way that's going to bring your partner closer, or in a way where you're going to end up being on the same team. What are those core relational skills that we all need? What does it actually mean to be relational? And this is where this work just really fills me up. It's incredible to be able to teach people all over the world now what it means to have a secure and healthy partnership.
In your experience, what is the one thing that you see people really stumbling on or struggling with when it comes to building those really healthy interpersonal relationships and dynamics?
Yeah. Do you want me to specifically speak to the mother-in-law dynamic, or do you want me to speak more to just relationships in general?
Relationships in general, and then we're going to get to
Yeah. The ability to hold differentiation. What do I mean by differentiation? It means that you and I are two separate people. It means that inside of myself, I have my own thoughts, feelings, desires, wishes, and values, and you will have your own, and they're going to be different from mine. And that I'm not responsible for all of yours. You're not responsible for all of mine, but now we have to communicate so that we can co-create. I use that word a lot. And the imagery that I like to use that goes with that is It's almost like a sandbox. Imagine in a sandbox, you are there with your bucket and shovel and you're building sandcastles. And your partner comes over and you say, no, hang on, you can't bring your cars over. We're not playing cars and trucks. It's only shovels and buckets. That's not co-creation. That's hyper-independence. That is saying, this is how we do it. This is autonomy. I'm only doing it this way. But interdependence is the ability to say, oh, that's what you like. And this is what I like. So how do we then build roads around my castles? And you can have this area to play with the cars, and I'm going to do this. And so we're co-creating in the sandbox together.
That's so interesting. Now, let's talk about the relationship piece with the mother-in-law. And before we even talk about anything related to that, why does that word mother-in-law, why is it so loaded? I mean, why is it this caricature of a villain oftentimes? Like, where does that come from?
It is such a trope. It's been part of our cultural, our generational. I mean, we think about Taylor Swift having a line in Antihero about daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. We think of the movie with Jane Fonda called Monster-in-Law. There is this common conflict that shows up most often between two women, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. It's not to say that we don't have conflict between a son-in-law and his mother-in-law, so her mother or the other partner's mother. That is possible. But the most common conflictual relationship is between these two women. And I've understood this through various multiple ways. One of them being that there's this tension between these two women. And the tension is because women today are doing things differently around raising children, around the mental load, around how they're showing up in their relationships, in their work world. And that difference can create tension with their mother-in-law. But the other piece too is role importance. That a mother wants to remain important. And so when another woman comes in, it can sometimes feel like, where's my significance here? Am I going to lose time with my family? What does it look like to build a new family? And I think a lot of times in cultural media representations of mothers-in-law, we see the controlling mother-in-law or the monster-in-law that's coming in and saying, this is how it is. Not all mothers-in-law are like that. And then there's this other element here as well, where it really draws upon what does it mean to be a couple, to then create healthy communication and sharing expectations and needs and boundaries with extended family, particularly when it's not your own.
Very interesting. And to drill in on that point, I have two daughters, but I have friends who have two sons, and they often joke, oh gosh, I'm going to be the mother-in-law, or I'm not going to be as involved or matriarchal in their lives once they get in, if they get married. And I think, to your point, I think so many mothers vis-a-vis their sons feel like they're going to lose that matriarchal position to the next woman that comes into their lives. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely part of that role. And there is a way that mothers to sons can create healthy partnerships and relationships, which is around openness to feedback and inviting feelings from your son and not pushing or poking for information from them, helping them to become autonomous and independent. My son is 10 years old, and one of the things I'm constantly balancing as he's in middle childhood now is this need for his autonomy and his also need for closeness with me, and recognizing, of course, and I speak about this in the book, is that a mother is the first representation of what it means to love a woman with a son. And we then have to release our sons. We have to release our children to go and be the people they need to be. And it is counterintuitive. It works against us to hold our children tighter. It's kind of the image that comes to mind is when it's an 8-month-old. And right at 8 months, you start to notice your baby separating from you more. It's the first time where they're pushing you away and they want to be put down on the floor. And it's in this moment where you don't hold on tighter and saying, oh, mommy wants a hug and snuggle. You say, yes, of course you want to play on the floor. Can I sit beside you? Let's get the blocks. Let's try this. That's all about creating autonomy. And we're slowly doing that throughout our kids' lifespan. And so wanting then to be present with our children, to not hold on so tightly and to really build healthy relationships, and not just with the son, but also with the person he chooses to be with.
I love that you brought that back to parenting, because I will get back to the book and the mother-in-law trope in a moment. But just to drill down on that comment you made about parenting and giving the kids, the autonomy, yet still allowing for closeness. What's the one thing that you wish parents could really take away from how to foster and build those really healthy child to parent dynamics?
I think about the relational piece that we want to teach our children. And this doesn't happen when a baby is 10 months old or a toddler, but you slowly start to integrate it into communication and connection with your kids, which is to be able to say something like, you experience the world this way and I experience the world another way. And that's okay. And now we need to find a way to make this work together. So a recent example that I shared is I was in the middle of a workout. My daughter came down, she's 8, and she says, I really need you to do this with me right now. And I said, I understand. I totally see where you're coming from. This is so pressing for you and it feels urgent. So I'm validating her feeling. I'm sitting in her lived experience. That's the other. I talk about seeing self and other. And then we go into the self and I say to her, I will be 10 more minutes. I'm going to finish my workout and then I will be there with you. And so it lets her know that I'm also in this relationship with her. Because I have needs, and it's not I'm never coming to you. It's not you're not important. And it's also not okay, let me just stop my workout and do everything that you need me to do. It's again, that co-creating. And so it was hard for her. And she pressed again saying, no, I need you now. And knowing this was not an urgent, there was no danger, nobody was injured. I'd said, I know this is really hard. I'm going to take these 10 minutes and then I'll be upstairs with you. And that's relational.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because as you're giving me the example, sort of the words that are coming to my mind is, you're teaching your children compromise. You're teaching your children it's not all about you, which sometimes there can be a lot of self-entitlement, because as parents, our knee-jerk reaction is to drop absolutely everything and quickly tend to their needs and give them what they want in that moment and that instant gratification, which they're not only getting from the external world, but sometimes we are also giving it to them out of love. So is it compromise, teaching them the give and take of the relationship?
Yes, that's part of it. And then we also add in validation. When we see someone's emotion, we diffuse emotion. We help them label it. Labeling emotion is so powerful. I see you're upset. I see you're disappointed. I see this is a really hard moment for you. That right there is like someone sinking into this feeling of safety. It's like, okay, this is real for me. My experience is real and my caregiver sees it for me. So that is the number one piece right there. And because we want to move on to healthy adult relationships where that other person can pause and validate you as well. So the more you're modeling that to your children, the more they internalize it, and then they can practice it with others and look for others who are going to do it with them. And then we teach that boundary piece, which is, I can't come this moment. And that's self-regulation. That is teaching you to ride the wave of emotion, right? How often, even if we think about adult romantic relationships, that I'll use this example. It was one of my reels that went quite viral around a coffee mug left beside the kitchen sink. The husband walks in, leaves the coffee mug there after the woman has just cleaned in the first scene. And not being regulated, not being able to self-regulate in those moments would be like, you did it again. You never think of me. You left the mug there. You don't even care about me. Anger shot through the roof. I'm coming from the back of my brain. My amygdala is blaring. Emotions are only seeing red. And that happens when a lot of us don't learn how to regulate feelings, how to slow things down, how to go into our bodies and breathe and tell ourselves nothing is on fire here. And so that's a moment that you're teaching that to your child there. So then you regulate the feeling that shows up in the moment. So then later on, when you and your partner are having your 10-minute check-in before bedtime, which I recommend to all couples to do, you check in with each other and you're like, hey, I've noticed this pattern that comes up, and you talk about how you're feeling and what you need.
What does that check-in look like?
Yeah, I often hear from parents, I know you hear this as well, which is, we're so busy, we don't have time together. We feel like two ships passing in the night. Parenthood is front and center. And we know from the research that parents to young children spend less than 30 minutes a week talking together. And most of that is transactional. Where's the splash pans? Who's doing drop off? Who's making lunches? 30 minutes a week. That's it. And what I encourage couples to do is to say to yourself, set a timer, give yourself 10 minutes at the end of the night. We all have 10 minutes no matter how exhausted we are. Many of us are on our phones, scrolling, distracted, numbing out, which sometimes I get it. And when you spend 10 minutes at the end of the day, you feel the benefits of connecting with your partner. And if it helps you, you can bring in a card deck to ask each other fun questions. You can have 3 questions that you check in with each other, which might be something like, what was something stressful that happened for you today? Just something to make sure you're not putting your relationship and connection completely on the back burner during these busy parenting seasons.
I love that. And you're right. Everybody has 10 minutes, but and I think the setting the timer thing can also be really helpful. So you feel like you're in this, short check-in and not this long, never-ending session, which has its time and place as well. Tracy, you could have written about absolutely anything in the world because you have so much experience working with couples and families and individuals. Firstly, I love the title of your book, You, Your Husband, and Your Mother. But from all the topics you could have really written a book about, what was it about this particular topic that made you feel so inspired?
Mostly the thousands of women and couples I have worked with, specifically with this struggle. The book title, You, Your Husband, and His Mother. So his mother. And I would sit in sessions wishing I had a resource so that they could do it together, so that they could follow the steps outside of session, because we know that when you sit for an hour, 50 minutes with a therapist once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks, it's especially harder as a couple to get into couples therapy because of the pulling together of multiple schedules. I found myself often wishing that there was a resource to support people in this. And because truly it is one of the top reasons why couples end up separating, because they have not been able to navigate this conflict. And I hear from so many couples who come in and they say, we have a good marriage except for when. And that's related to when they're navigating extended family.
That is so interesting to me because I see it play out in my own life, in the lives of the people closest to me, friends. And so to hear you say that this is what you see in your work, I can see that because I think we all either have experienced it personally or we know someone very close to us that is experiencing it personally. Not to dilute, the years of work you have done, but if there's a sort of common thread and a common complaint that is coming out of the woman's mouth in relation to the mother-in-law, what is that? And then is it different for the partner or the spouse, the husband?
Great question. One of the most common things I hear from daughters-in-law is, I am made out to be the bad one. I'm the scapegoat. I am blamed for things going wrong in their family. And the most common thing I hear from the partner, which often comes from a place of lack of understanding and not having skills and tools and awareness around these patterns, which is again why the book is so necessary and why. So the book has 5 steps. It's my vault method. And step 3 is about understanding the triangle. There's a triangle that exists between you, your husband, and his mother. And so many people will say, you're putting me in the middle, when actually it's this triangle that takes over the dynamic and it becomes problematic. And so one of the most common things I hear from men or partners in this dynamic is they'll say something like, that's just my mom. She means well. It's not a big deal. And so that dismissiveness and deflection ends up leading this couple to get stuck in a negative cycle where they can't communicate and they can't get on the same page because she's saying, daughter-in-law is saying, the wife is saying, this doesn't feel good for me. Something isn't feeling good. And her husband is saying, it's not that big of a deal. I want to emphasize that, a lot of times people are thinking, there's 2 pieces I really want to share here, Shraysi, which is that one, many people will say, I have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. And I am always like, yes, that's amazing. I love that. And what I also ask my community is, has there ever been a time where you and your partner have gotten into a disagreement because of his mom? And over 86% of people say yes. So it's not necessarily that you have a conflictual relationship, but there has been a time where you have been on a different page than your husband. And then the second piece is, if you have a good relationship with your mother-in-law or the other extended family member, this is still a resource for you because it's going to support you in holding those relationships together and making them even stronger. Because of course, with awareness and understanding of who we are, what we bring, what other people bring to the table, and then those skills that I'm teaching you in the book, you're going to feel more prepared for any of those difficult bumps that might come along the way.
I also hear a lot, to your point about dismissiveness, I'll also often hear, and this has happened with me as well, if I were to ever bring up something that I was unhappy about or didn't feel good about in that dynamic, I think the common, and this is not just my husband, I see this play out with my closest friends as well. It's like, oh, our parents are old. They're not going to change. They're so set in their ways. So let's just be the bigger, you be the bigger person, or we'll be the bigger people. And it feels to me like just kind of sweeping things under the rug, but also maybe a lack of wanting to be in any sort of confrontational situation because it's such a delicate dance, that relationship with the in-laws. And so I hear that a lot as well. And when I talk to my closest girlfriends, they all say the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, I also get the same, like, oh, our parents are old, or my mom's super old and she's really set in her ways. What do you do when that happens? Because you don't want to create conflict. You don't want to be confrontational, yet you also just don't want to sweep things under the rug. So like, where is that middle ground?
This comes back to the first step that I take couples through in the book, which is around identifying what's really important to you. This is around your values. And sometimes it can feel like a moving target where we say something like, yes, family is important, but what does that really mean? What does it mean to be nurturing family and spending time together? Does it mean that you're there every Sunday night from 3:30 to 9:30 past the kids' bedtime? Is that what it means? Or does it mean that you're having these close, deep conversations about certain things? Does it mean that you're relying on them for support and child? What does that really mean? So I think that's important, is for couples to get on the same page around that. But then I think the other piece here too is then asking ourselves, and this is where step 4 and 5 come in, which is around limits and boundaries and putting this into action. It's really about saying to yourself, what's within my control? And where do I have agency? I remind people that family is predictable and consistent. And so if you, as a daughter-in-law, you show up hoping this time will be different, and I walk you through different styles of daughters-in-law and different types of mothers-in-law in the book, that if you show up to the family event thinking, maybe she won't comment on our sleep choices this time. Maybe she's not going to tell me that I'm feeding wrong, etc., and she does it again, you will feel more frustrated because you had expectations and hopes that she would be different. But instead, I walk couples through, or if your partner's not on the page with you to do it with you, you can still prepare yourself. How do I want to deal with that in the moment? Just because someone is set in their ways doesn't mean it's okay for you. It's kind of like saying, well, if this person hits you and they've hit people all their lives, well, it's just okay. No, it's not, because it doesn't feel good.
Right. You mentioned just now about commenting on parenting choices. There's a lot of people that are navigating this in real time, and some that are about to navigate this as they become parents. I would like to believe, obviously, most grandparents are well-intentioned. But how do couples find that balance between you making the choices for your kid and then the sort of external family that's chiming in on your parenting decisions, or where you're sending the kid to school, or how you're raising them? And then the list goes on and on and on. And every now and then it's like a little innocent comment, but multiple of innocent comments can start to feel like really snide jabs. And I think can create a lot of tension and even ultimately break down relationships. So advice for parents navigating raising children, which is already difficult, keeping their marriage afloat, another challenge, and then having to deal with these quote unquote well-intentioned grandparents constantly giving their 2 cents.
I always walk people through identifying first, who are you setting the boundary with? What type of relationship do you have with them? And what type of relationship do you want to have with them? And so if they are someone who is well-intentioned, who hears your feedback, who knows where you're coming from, those are people that you can explain things a little bit more to. However, if this is a type of mother-in-law that is more, one of the types is a blamer type, who scapegoats the daughter-in-law, she might not be someone that you're going to get into a debate with. You're not going to over explain yourself, because no matter what, she's not going to believe you. And so then the question is, when she starts to make those comments, how do you protect yourself? What's the boundary that you want to make? So with many of the women I work with, we walk through, is this a moment where you excuse yourself and go to the washroom? So you're at your in-laws' house, you're in the living room, mother-in-law starts to talk about the schools you're choosing and whatever else. And you excuse yourself. Oh, I just need to go to the washroom. Or, oh, I'm thirsty. I have to go get some water. And you leave the room, you give yourself that beat. And that's a self-boundary. That's you saying, I'm not willing to enter into this conversation with someone. And typically we do that approach when we've tried other approaches and they don't work. And so another approach that would give more information would sound something like, I know how much you love the kids. We don't need feedback about our choices right now. So it'd be better if, we don't talk about our parenting choices around this. Or something even more concise is, we know how much you love the kids. We're not looking for parenting advice, so I'm just going to change the topic. Very clear. You don't have to explain it. And I think one of the challenges for many people, especially for daughters-in-law, is we get into justification and over-explaining, because we think if they just understand why we're doing this, then they'll agree with us and we'll feel good. And so then we say, hey, I know you love the kids. Here are all of the reasons, the research, my physician, this expert on Instagram, this podcast, here are all the reasons why we're doing the things. And the more you argue, the more you dilute your message. And the more you give permission to your mother-in-law that you can ask about this topic, instead of saying, this isn't something we're willing to talk about. Hey, are you following the Leafs this year? It's hockey, Canada hockey.
Okay. And yeah, I love that. Just keep it short and sweet and signal that this is not a conversation you want to get into. Because I think you're right. The mistake we make is like over explaining, trying to make them see our viewpoint.
Giving permission. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We talk a lot about the mother-in-law's role here, but I have also seen daughter-in-laws behaving badly. That can sometimes be antagonistic to the relationship. Perhaps the relationship is already strained and maybe the mother-in-law has done or said, unsightly things in the past. But I've also seen the reverse, where the daughter-in-law goes in super defensive and thinks everyone's out to get her. And then it just starts to create this conflict that may not have been there. What is the role of the daughter-in-law here? And do you see a lot of that in your work, where a woman has come to you and says, I have an issue with my mother-in-law, but then as you dig deep, you're finding that there's certain behaviors that the daughter-in-law is doing that's actually not beneficial to that relationship. So what advice do you have for the daughter-in-laws?
It's interesting because I hear you pointing out some of the negative behaviors, but I want to also point out behaviors that tend to be deemed positive in the public's eye, which is things like people pleasing and caregiving, self-abandonment. So we can look at a whole spectrum. There's a daughter-in-law who's more rigid with her boundaries and says, I'll just make up an example, but no, absolutely not. You cannot hold our baby. It's 9:56 and I have to put baby down for a nap at 9:58. Making up the example, or going in defensive and snapping back at every response. That's one area, versus then the pleasers, the ones who are trying really hard, the ones who give everything and say yes and have no boundaries. So it's interesting because, Shraysi, when I'm working with people, I always go inside of them. That is where you have the most control and agency, is what is going on for you here. What are your thoughts? What are your perceptions? How could we start to look at this from other approaches? How could we set a different way of connecting with this person that's not going to fire everybody up? And then can we even switch roles? If you are going in with this defensive approach, first I'm going to say to you, I get it. You have had really hurtful comments before. You're coming in defending yourself because it doesn't feel good. And put yourself on the other shoe. What would that be like for you to get a comment that sounds like that? And now how can we do this differently so that you're not the one feeling like you're on fire all the time? So there is definitely a huge piece in this work where we have to look within ourselves and ask ourselves, how do I want to show up? What's important to me?
I have one last question about this, and then I want to move on to another topic, but just on the mother-in-law thing. So many times also, I think women turn to their partners or their spouses and they're like, you need to stand up for me, or you need to speak up, or you need to get involved. So it's not just this woman to woman, combative atmosphere, but you want the husband to advocate on your behalf. Is that the right approach? Or like, what is the role of the man here? And how can he help improve the relationship, diffuse the tension, make things just better?
Yeah, that really depends. It depends on what's been happening in the past. It depends on the type of mother-in-law you have. It depends on the roles that everybody is playing. I encourage men. So I say to all couples that I work with, now is the time to prioritize your chosen family. That's you, your partner, and your children, if you have them. And this doesn't mean you abandon your family of origin. It means that you're putting your chosen family's feelings first, and that you have to come together to do that. And then if there is tension and conflict, it is often, I recommend that it's the adult child to that parent to go and do the communication. But that communication, that communicating with them, it can't come in a way that splits people. So if I go to my family, and Greg's my husband's name, if I go to my family and say, Greg doesn't want to come for Christmas this year, we're not going to come and visit you guys for Christmas. Immediately, I have made Greg the bad guy, and I did not protect our marriage. But it's much different if I go to my family and say, hey, listen, guys, we love Christmas events. Traveling is so much. This year, we're not going to do it with you in this city. We'll find another time later on to get together and have our own celebration. Right there, united front. And so partners have to protect their marriage, because families will find a reason for why things aren't working. And as I said earlier, daughters-in-law are often made to be the scapegoats. And the goal is to be the we. And if you, even when you present yourself as a we, your extended family might still make them out to be the bad guy.
Right.
But we still need to present it as that united front.
I love that piece of advice, because you're right. Like at that point, when you are presenting that united front, when you are coming as this is a we decision as opposed to a me or a he, then they can't really put the blame on any one person.
Some people still will, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
But the goal is to not further feed that narrative. And because here's the other piece I want people to recognize is that for some families, a mother and her son, the mother might say, we didn't have any of these problems before she joined the family. You know, he never didn't show up for a family event, and now he's with her, and now you're not coming to these events. Still doesn't make her the bad one. It means that now they're negotiating these new terms, and it's difficult. But a lot of this comes back to a breakdown in communication around expectations and hopes, and being forthcoming, and around people practicing that skill of differentiation. So in chapter 2 of the book, I go through a list of toxic family patterns that show up that contribute to this dynamic. And it's often part of this, as we kind of circle back to where we started before, it's that struggle to differentiate from your son, to be able to see he has to prioritize his chosen family now. It doesn't mean he doesn't love us anymore, but now how can we then prioritize, or not prioritize, how can we then make time to nurture this part of our family while he goes and does it with his family? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I want to switch gears briefly, because I could talk about this book forever, and I'm so excited that it's out there in the world. But to switch gears, we have a lot of interracial families. Different cultures coming together from different ends of the planet, different religion. And it's one thing to navigate that as just a couple, but it's a whole other dynamic when you have a child in the mix. You know, for argument's sake. And there's some people that aren't even super religious. It could be more cultural nuances or just wanting to pass down the thing that they grew up with. You know, I'm Indian, but my husband's half Indian, half Polish American. So there is a little bit of, overcoming some of those cultural differences. But for the most part, it's even Steven. But I see with friends and other family members, right. Hindu with Jewish, Catholic with Muslim. What is your advice for couples that are navigating, a household with two separate religion and cultures, but now have a child in the mix? What is a really healthy way to still pass down the culture without it feeling like mine's better than yours or mine has to be the dominating one?
This really comes back to those conversations that couples need to have ahead of time. And it's never too late to have those conversations, but to come together and say, what is important about your culture? What's important about mine? How do we want to do this? And straightforward, it's not for anyone to tell you how you want to do it. It's for you two to decide together, and then to be able to communicate that to family. To be able to say, this is where we are. And also when we think about the role of family, then inviting them to play that specific role for it. But it will likely also be about having boundaries around, I know this is how you did it, and now this is how we're choosing to do it. And really for couples to not get stuck in arguing around what's right or wrong. There is no right or wrong way to do this. Although I know that when you come from families, they can tell you, no, you're supposed to do it this way. And now you're coming together. But I really do think that it's about being forthcoming and open with families, and also appreciating that other people might be upset because they had hopes for how a grandchild would be integrated into the world, into the culture, and that might not be met. Still doesn't make you wrong, though.
And then is there any sort of like tangible things that couples can do to make it feel like the other person's culture and religion is equally important and included? Or do you somehow just split it down the middle and then let the child decide as they get older? Like, what's a really maybe like one tangible thing people can start doing today?
Yeah, I think this would be about having openness for both sides. I firmly don't believe that couples can ever be equal in anything that they are doing, which would include around how we nurture culture, religion into our lives. But how do we then both show up in today's moment by being respectful, open, caring, and loving for each person's culture, each person's religion, and then allowing our child to experience the love from each parent, and then get to make a decision moving forward as they get older. They'll get to decide that.
I could talk to you forever, but I also want to be respectful of your time. Your book, can you tell our audience where they can get it? And what is sort of the one thing from the book that you think people will really walk away from?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so grateful that we've had this chance to talk about one of my favorite topics. So the book is available for pre-order. There's a pre-order bonus out right now, knowing that the holidays are coming up. The bonus, one of the bonuses is around giving you a list of questions that most couples don't even know that they need to be asking each other these questions. And this comes from the second step in my Vault method. So you can find out all the details on my website, drtracyd.com. I have the links there to order the book. You'll be the first to get it. Pre-orders are so important for books when they come out. And also too, I'm on social and I love being social. So if you've listened or watched this, please come over and say hello to me on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Tracy D, and let me know what stood out for you from our conversation today.
Amazing. And then where can people listen to your podcast?
Yes, absolutely. My podcast is Dear Dr. Tracy, and that's available on any Spotify, iTunes, any podcast platform.
We're going to share all the links in the comment section. Dr. Tracy Dalgleish, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so happy we got to have this conversation, and congratulations on your book. I'm going to be doing the pre-order and also gifting it to a lot of girlfriends in my life who I know can really use it.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.